Well, let's start. My name is Carla Romeu. I know some of you know me. Thanks everyone for joining this afternoon. I am at IDH the Senior Manager of Impact Research. And I am a researcher myself by training. I've been 8 years in academia before joining IDH. And today we are gonna explain you how IDH is assessing its contribution to public good impact. And at the end of the session, we will do questions and answers. So the presentation is gonna be 45 minutes, and then we will have 15 minutes of discussion. And just for let you know, we are recording this, so later on we will also send all these recorded. So what are we going to talk today is a little bit on who is IDH, briefly, and how do we work. And then we will go in depth on how do we measure our contribution to impact, and which is the evidence that we have gathered to date, and how do we do our in-depth impact research. And to make this more explicit, we will zoom in into one of our examples on one of our projects on how we mitigate deforestation in the Southwest Mau Forest. Finally, conclusions and questions and answers. I hope you find this interesting as we do. So let's start. Who is IDH? We are an organization that organize public and private partnerships. So we, in all our projects, we have co-investment. Half of the money is coming. Half of the money is coming from the private sector. Sorry, I think.
Thank you.
More sustainable to achieve this systemic change. By systemic change, we mean a change that it's not only within one company, but it stays systemic. And all this works in several SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, as you can see below. So in a nutshell, that's how we work to achieve this systemic change. We work with private business. We want to change the practices to make them more sustainable, and we also work on the governance of the sector to improve this overall governance to make it possible these changes. And we also work at the field level to achieve at the end the change at the field. And we believe that by working in these three areas at the same time, we will achieve this systemic permanent change. So what do we do exactly? This is very nice. This is maybe too high level. So let's go into specifics. We work in several programs. For instance, we work on the cotton sector, on the tea sector, oil, palm, coffee, cocoa, etc. And we also work in the landscapes. By landscapes, we mean that we have realized that to address sustainability issues such as deforestation, it's not enough to work with one sector. You need to bring different sectors together to tackle together deforestation issues. And this is what we do in several landscapes. You see here, for instance, in Vietnam, in Liberia, in Indonesia, we bring different sectors together, also the private, the public, to protect these landscapes. So that's what we do where, but what do we want to achieve? What we want to achieve, and we call these our impact areas. We have 5 areas that we focus on. The first one is on smallholders inclusion, and that's where IDH has been working the longest. Here, what we do is try to help smallholder farmers improve their yields and livelihoods, and also make them part of all the chain, all the trade. And we also work on mitigation of deforestation, as I just explained. But we also work on with the workers, not only with the farmers, but with the workers that work in plantations, for instance, in tea plantations, or the workers that work in factories such as in apparel. We have also a program on apparel. And at the farm level, we also work on responsible agrochemical management. So we also work with farmers to make sure they use agrochemicals in a responsible way, and when possible, reduce the inputs. And finally, we also work on gender and gender equality and empowerment. So if you put all of this together, all the sectors that we work on, all the impact themes that we work on, and the countries that we work in, you have this map. We are quite proud of this map. It's not easy to summarize all IDH in one slide, but if we have to do so, I think this is one of the best slides. It can show the whole IDH. So you can see all the countries that we work on, and you can see all the sectors. And within a country, let's, for instance, take Malawi. You can see in Malawi, we have the picture of tea. So it means that we work with tea in Malawi, and we have two colors. The red color, which means that we work on the tea sector for smallholder inclusivity, but also on the dark green, we work on living wage and working conditions. So this is a whole IDH, and this is where my job becomes challenging because we need to measure our impact. We need to measure what we achieve on this whole portfolio. So how do we work? How to be able to do this? We have designed this theoretical thinking on our concepts, our interventions. So we have our intervention strategy, and we have an idea. Great, but how do you do this? So you have to design prototypes or projects on the field to be able to test this idea if it actually works or not. And finally, you have to gather the proof, not only to go back to the donors and say, yeah, this money has been well spent, but also to see if this strategy is working in the field, and if not, learn about it and improve it. So we believe that these three things together is what will prove that we achieve this public good impact, and by proving it, this innovation can be replicated and scaled by others. And later on in the presentation, I will explain you a little bit more on our intervention strategies, but this is not the main focus of this presentation, but the main focus is on our proof. How do we gather this proof? Okay, so we will walk you through step by step on how do we measure our contribution to impact. Here I have to acknowledge our partners on this journey, is it the University of Wageningen and KPMG. And together we have developed a theory-based methodology to gradually gather evidence on this complex IDH portfolio. So the first step is to design an intervention logics. I am sure many of you are familiar with this term, maybe others are not. So I will show you what is an intervention logic. This is our intervention logics for one of our impact themes. So what we will do to achieve smallholder inclusivity and better livelihoods for smallholder farmers. You can see here, it looks like a metro line from London, maybe. You can see on the left, it goes from input to impact. So our steps, input, output, outcome, and impact. What we think it's going to happen through our interventions. And then we have below the three areas that we work: governance, field level, and business practices. And each, there is a roadmap on how this leads to impact. So we have this intervention logic designed for all of our impact themes. That means the 5 impact themes that I have explained you before: gender, agrochemicals, smallholders, and so on. And if you have any questions on the intervention logics, you can always contact me later. They are also published in our website and in our booklet. So let's go into the next step, which is we have this huge intervention logic. So we identified some core pathways. We cannot measure everything, so we identify the core pathways that we want to focus our research on. This is here in this slide. You can see it more summarized. For instance, we have again in the left our 3 result areas, and on the top you have from output to outcome to impact. So let me walk you through the second one, through the field level sustainability. For instance, what do we mean? We mean that we work with smallholder farmers to provide fertilizers, to provide access to finance, to provide training. This is our output. And we expect that by giving these services to farmers, they will adopt better agricultural practices and also better business practices. And we expect that this will lead to the impact of increased yields, increased livelihoods, etc. So these are our core pathways that we want to measure. And what would be the next step? The next step is to see how to gather all this evidence and which are the gaps that we need to fill in. So if we go again to the same slide, you see as output and outcome level, which is a bit easier to gather evidence on the impact level, we have indicators, and I'm sure many of you are also familiar with this term, key performance indicators. So IDH for the whole portfolio has identified 17 key indicators to measure output and outcome level for all the projects that we work on. So that's, for instance, the number of farmers that are reached or the area that our training is going to be applied to. So this is to get track already on what we achieve. And these indicators are being reported by all our IPs, which means implementing partners. And this data is gathered yearly. So we do have a lot of data coming on our projects in the field. But then there is the other level, which is the impact level, which, as I said, is more challenging. And many of you, I'm sure, are aware of these challenges. And you need more in-depth research to be able to measure impact level, because we are talking about improved livelihoods, improved yields. So it's not enough that someone reports on that, but we need maybe a control group, we need a baseline, we need proper research to measure this impact. And also because to bring the three result areas together to analyze how changes in governance, changes in business, and changes at the field level achieve this systemic change, and to know if this can be replicated and scale, it's not only about a number, but it's about in-depth impact research. So this is what, at the end of the presentation, we will go more in depth into one of these examples of how we do in-depth impact research. So if we go back to the whole portfolio of IDH, we have explained you, we need these intervention logics, we need to identify the core pathways, identify the gaps, and then, of course, we need to start gathering the evidence. How do we do that? If you see in this figure on the left, we will talk about the evidence of how to gather evidence for the whole IDH, that map that I showed you at the beginning, this huge map of all IDH is doing. We need to gather evidence from there. And some of the evidence come, as you see on the back, from the key performance indicators, these 17 indicators that our partners report on to tell us about the progress yearly. But also with Wageningen and KPMG, and for this first review of our impact, they also use a literature review, which was very useful to see what other organizations similar to our organizations like UTS, Rainforest Alliance, ISIL, other organizations, which are the research that they have commissioned and which are the pathways that they have already proven. So for instance, maybe ISIL has already proven that by giving certification, farmers improve agricultural practices. So Wageningen and KPMG did all this literature review, and this is summarized later on in the presentation. And also they did a survey to all of our partners and also to people who knows about IDH, but maybe is not working with us. So we also include these engaged outsiders that we call to have their inputs on what do they think about our strategies and if we achieve what we want to achieve through our pathways. So this on the left is to capture the whole evidence for the whole IDH in general, and this is more high level, of course. So if we want to go more in depth, we have this in-depth research. And to be able to do this in-depth research that we do for some of our programs, so we do it at least for one project for each impact theme. So let's say for one project for smallholders, one project for deforestation, we zoom in and we do this in-depth research. So what do we do for these projects? What we do is we measure the impact pathways, or we clarify what we want to do in this project. So what's our output, outcome, impact level? What do we want to achieve in, for instance, Kenya in the Mau forest? Then when we know clearly what we want to achieve, we need to commission research to gather quantitative and also qualitative data that will help us understand how we achieve change in these three areas, in the governance, in the business practices, in the field level, and how these changes can lead to systemic change. Because then it's when we can publish this outside IDH and we can show the world this has worked. So now it's up to you guys, governments, other organizations, to embrace this and to make it happen in other places because this is proven to work. And our challenge also is from all these projects is to measure IDH contribution, because we don't work alone. We work with so many other partners. So to be able to say that IDH achieved that, of course, we also need to measure our contribution, and we need some external party to help us with that. So if we go back to this slide, we are on the 5th step, which is, okay, now we have to gather all this evidence and pull all these evidence together. And this is what we have done this year. And that's the main purpose of this seminar. It's because we publish these reports. On the left, you see the report published by Wageningen at KPMG. This is the detailed report on all the evidence they gather through our pathways, what has been proven by the literature, what has not been proven, what has been proven by IDH, and also the results of the sector survey. And all this is compiled in this document, which is also available in our website. But then on the right, we have also produced ourselves IDH a summary of it, because we know many people is very busy and cannot read 100 pages. So we have commissioned this, we have published this report that we also have in the website, and that we will share it with you after this webinar again. And what we do here is we do a summary of all this evidence, all these pathways, and what has been proven and what still needs to be proven. And I'm gonna now walk you through all of this evidence, such a summary, for you to know exactly what are we presenting in this report and what's the things that have been proven already. So if we go back to the first impact theme, that means our work on building models for smallholder inclusivity, so making sure smallholder farmers are included. You can see in this slide, again, we have our work on governance, on field level, on business practices. And you can see from output to outcome on the left, and from outcome to impact on the right. And you can see positive signs, which means that these relationships have been proven. For instance, if we go at the field level, we see that we can say that by giving services to farmers like fertilizers, finance, and training, they adopt better agricultural practices and business practices. There is a positive here, which means that yes, this has been proven, so that's good. That means that we can keep working on that because it's proven to work. But then on the right, our next impact assumption is that by adopting these agricultural practices and these better business practices, farmers can increase yields, profitability, and livelihoods. And here we have some evidence that prove that this is the case, but also some evidence that may prove that it's not always the case. So that's why we are still building this impact evidence. So you can see for this work on smallholder farmers, our work from output to outcome for the three areas has been proven, but from outcome to impact, we are still building this evidence. This is normal because many of you know to be able to show impact takes a while, because many of these impacts, like in better livelihoods, it's not in 1 year that you can achieve that. So we will continue gathering this evidence. If we go to the next work that we do on mitigating deforestation, we again present the same type of format. So you are now aware of each area, governance, field level, and business practices, output to outcome, and outcome to impact. So if you look at the dark boxes here, you see that everything is says building impact evidence. So here we cannot yet say that what we are doing has been proven to work. Why is that? Well, first, because we started this approach on mitigating deforestation only around 2 years ago, and many of these projects are very innovative. And it takes a while, not only for IDH to gather the evidence, but also we cannot look at the literature if this has been proven to work or not, because it's so innovative that we cannot find any evidence by other people. So we will keep gathering this evidence and populating this. But for you to understand better why I'm saying this is innovative and what do we do on this impact theme, I will walk you through the last one on business practices. What we do here is we engage the private sector to work in these multi-stakeholder coalitions. So we bring together the public and the private sector to work together in a landscape to stop deforestation. And we want the private companies to commit on stopping deforestation. So for instance, we call it our PPI approach, P for production, protection, and inclusion, which means that we work with the private companies, we work together with them on increasing production per hectare. So we can help you create innovations to improve the production in this hectare, but in exchange, you commit not to cut the forest next to your plantation. So this is the production protection link. But at the same time, we have the inclusion link, which also means that within these partnerships and within these contracts, we also include the local communities. So we make sure that they are not excluded from the forest without having an alternative livelihood to be able to survive. So that's what we are doing in this impact theme, and that's where we will keep gathering evidence. And if you have further questions on this PPI approach, please don't hesitate to contact me or my colleagues working on this. If we go to the next one, our third impact theme, our third focus is on better working conditions and living wages. So we work in Malawi with the tea industry and in Vietnam with the apparel industry to try and make sure that workers can have better conditions and better wages. If I will walk you through, for instance, in this case, on what we do at the governance level, and this first step, as you see, we actually the whole impact pathway has been shown evidence, so we can say it has been proven, our approach here. So we work, we support these multi-stakeholder coalitions, again, with the private and the public sector. And we work with them to achieve worker management dialogue, for instance, in Vietnam, or also collective bargaining agreements. And sorry for my pronunciation, this is very difficult sentence for me. I'm Spanish, by the way, if you didn't notice. So this has been proven that for us supporting this initiative, we achieve this better dialogue and better CBAs. And also this is the output, and we expect that by having these CBAs and these worker management dialogues, we have this improved better governance that creates this enabling environment to further improve the working conditions of the workers. And finally, I'll present you the evidence on the work that we do on agrochemical management. So how to make sure that agrochemicals are used responsibly and when possible, reduce the input. So I'm not gonna walk you through the pathways here, but mainly you can see is that, again, our approach from output to outcome has been proven. So it's good, what we are doing there works. But still, we have to build extra evidence that our work at the governance level and at the business level on agrochemicals is working and reaching the impact that we want to reach. So at this moment, I will just wrap up what I've explained now. I've explained you the evidence that we have gathered and that you can find more in detail in the reports on the 4 impact themes. And you may notice that I've not explained gender. Gender was a full impact theme for IDH since end of 2016. So we will present the evidence on gender on our next report. It was not possible to include in this first report, which started before that date. But as you can see, for the 4 impact themes that we have presented, there is many of the approaches of IDH that have been already proven by us or by other organizations, but there is also other pathways that still need to be proven, and that's where this impact research becomes relevant and important, and that's where we also welcome help from any research institution and any other partners that say, maybe we are working on the same pathway, so let's team up together to measure that our approach work, and if not, to change our approach because we realize that it doesn't work how we want to work. Okay, so after this first round of theory, we would like to have your feedback. I've talked a lot, but I would love now you to talk, or to give us, not to talk, sorry, but give us some feedback on what do you think so far on what we have been presenting. So as you can see in this slide, you can give us feedback through 2 ways. There is a web link here, paulev.com IDH. So if you go there, or you can also text as you see below. If you are more old school and prefer texting, that's also fine. And we would love to have your inputs on what do you think on scale from 0 to 10. How comprehensive do you find the impact research methodology that we are using? So do you think it has been well explained, but especially do you think that it makes sense that this methodology is good to measure impact? So I will leave you some seconds for you to answer. Thank you so much for your feedback. Now that I'm having time to look at some other screens here in my room, I see that we have 70 participants. So very, very happy about that. Thanks everyone for being here. And thanks for the responses. Nice to see on average 8. That's nice, and also interesting to see that some people find that maybe this is not as comprehensive as it should be. So I would love to hear more about this. So please, if you have any comments on that, follow up with me later after the webinar. And also, we will share with you a survey, and here in the survey you can give us your feedback. So I would love to know more about both the positive feedback and the negative feedback. Okay, so I think it's maybe time to move to the next question. We have another question for you. And this is, do you find this evidence that we have gathered, so all the evidence I have presented, the summary made by Wageningen and KPMG on our impact pathways that other organizations also work, do you find this useful for your organization or for other organizations that you work with? And I walk you through very quickly through the evidence, so probably to know more how useful it is, maybe you have to go more in depth on the report. But at this moment, would love to see your feedback. Again, good to have your feedback. Somewhat the evidence, I guess it's normal, not everybody works exactly on what we work, but maybe some of the pathways were useful for you, some are not because maybe you don't work on that, or maybe for other reasons. So again, very happy to have your feedback here and to follow up with all of you later on. Okay, so I think might be good to move on at this moment. So we have explained you a little bit of the whole of our methodology on how we measure our contribution to all of IDH on this big portfolio. But now I would like to dive you in on this in-depth evidence, in-depth research. How do we do it for some of these projects? So here you can see the projects that we focus on for each of our impact themes, so each of our impact areas. So for instance, on the top, on the left, you can see on the smallholders work. We work a lot, as you may know, on a smallholder inclusivity. This is what IDH has been working the longest. One of the main projects that we are focusing our research on is on the cocoa in Cote d'Ivoire, where we try to improve the bankability and the access to finance by farmers and by co-ops. So this is where our impact research is focused on smallholders, but we also have extra evidence coming from our service delivery models work and from BCI, Better Cotton Initiative. Again, if you want to know more about SDMs, you can check our website or you can contact me, SDMs by Service Delivery Models. What does it mean? On the deforestation, on the top right, we have two projects that we are focusing our in-depth impact research on. One is in Kenya, in the Mau forest, and the other one is in Indonesia, where we work for this PPI concept, production, protection, and inclusion in West Kalimantan. So we are doing in-depth research for both projects, and also some extra evidence is coming from our projects in Liberia and in Brazil. On the middle, you can see living wage and working conditions. Here we have two main projects that we have research on. One is in Malawi, where we work for the living wage in Malawi, and we have achieved the first collective bargain agreement in the history of tea industry in Malawi, which is great, but still work to be done, and we are still measuring the impact level. And then we also work in the factories in Vietnam in apparel, and some work on flowers and bananas on living wage too. On the agrochemicals, on the slide on the left, we have two main projects that we focus on our research. One is in India, with our work with Better Cotton Initiative. So we achieve better agrochemical management. And the other one is in Vietnam, when we have a landscape approach to improve agrochemical management for tea and coffee. And finally, for gender, we have research going on Kenya, on the tea sector, where we also work for addressing gender-based violence. And some extra work on flowers in Kenya also being assessed. So this is where the evidence, more in-depth evidence, is coming from. And I will now explain you exactly what it means, this in-depth impact research for one of these projects. This is the one of Mau Forest in Kenya, on the top on the right, where we have produced the first report on the first learnings on it. So that's what we are happy to share with you at this moment. So on mitigating deforestation in the Southwest Mau forest, what we want to do here is we work with the industry, with the private sector, the tea sector, the timber sector, and the hydropower sector. We bring them together with the public sector, and we join efforts to stop deforestation in the Mau forest. You can see the picture here, or where is it within Kenya, the Mau forest. And what we do, we have several projects going on. And you may think, why is the tea industry interested in protecting the forest? They are interested because the forest provides them with ecosystem services such as microclimate and water. And they realize that if the forest is gone, their tea production is also gone. So this is a very nice project where the private sector works with us to achieve this mitigation of deforestation. And for instance, some of the projects that we have some tree planting going on in the forest, but also we have to address these illegal activities that are happening within the forest. And we have set up some surveillance flights to stop deforestation, and also some improvement in law enforcement. And at the same time, we have designed Red Plaza strategy and integrated management plan. So we have many projects at the same time, because we realize one project is not enough to address these complex issues to stop deforestation. So after these first learnings, I'm going to present you these first learnings from this year and a half that this project has been going on. And again, for the three result areas, so for the private sector, for the sector governance, and for the field level, what we have achieved so far based on this first research. So on the left, we can say that thanks to this project, now there is a common strategic framework for the private sector to work together with the public sector to stop deforestation, and the private sector have contributed by cash and in kind yearly to this project, which is very needed and very nice. On the governance level, we have achieved this multi-stakeholder partnership coming together for the first time. It was very challenging for them to come together, and they actually really value the role of IDH as a neutral convener. Because before we chip in, they all wanted to protect deforestation, but they didn't really trust each other. So it was good to have a neutral convening, bringing them together. And they highly valued that. And finally, at the field level, what is actually happening in the field, we have some tree planting going on already in the landscape, and we also have these these flights organized by the tea sector, where it has already helped to stop deforestation, because if someone is doing illegal activities in the forest and see a flight surveillance, they stop these activities, which has been great. Okay, so we have learned many things from this project, and based on these learnings, we have identified the main challenges and which are the next steps for this project in the Southwest Mau Forest. One of the main challenges ahead for us is gaining more support, political support. And as you may be aware, Kenya just had elections, and in fact, they have to happen again. So the political framework is not that stable. So this is, of course, a challenge for the success of our project. And then this is needed in order to make sure that we have regulatory framework for stopping deforestation and for law enforcement, which is key. And what's next is we need to focus on these field level projects. We are building a fence around the forest, which will be managed by the local community to make sure that these are legal, to make it more difficult for the illegal activities to happen. And also we have to work with the local community on intensifying livestock production. So if they produce livestock within the farm, they don't need to access the forest illegally to graze. And finally, we also have to help the local community improve on alternative energy solutions in order to not use charcoal or timber from the forest. So many challenges and next steps ahead of this program, but we can happy to say we are in the right track. So what's next in terms of research? We want to show as much as possible our impact by 2020. So we need to continuously gathering evidence, both qualitative and quantitative evidence on what we are achieving. So also land use maps and satellite imagery to make sure we see that actually deforestation is going down. And we have a baseline now. We know where we are today, but we need a follow-up on where are going to be in some years. And also when we start working with the farmers on the livelihoods and so on, we have to set baselines. So it's complex. It's full of different projects within one project. Lots of things to come up, but that's what we are doing. So to wrap up, this is how we measure our contribution to impact. But if we go back to this main slide, IDH work is it's very challenging. It's spread all over the world. We work in many sectors. We work in many landscapes. We work in many things, smallholders, living wage. So we zoom in some projects. We keep other evidence high level, but challenging. It is challenging, and that's why we also organize this webinar to welcome any partners on partnering with us on this research. And what's next? What's next is we will continue on gathering evidence on these indicators, on the key performance indicators, and also in this impact research. And Wageningen and KPMG will be our knowledge partners on this, and they will be reviewing this evidence. And in 2019 and in 2021, they will produce a report, again, similar to this one, wrapping up all the evidence on these pathways. And hopefully we have shown that some of the pathways work, some of the things that still we are building evidence work, but maybe we show that it doesn't work, and that's fine. We want to learn from that in order to improve our strategies. And we also will produce our own booklet based on these learnings. And yeah, what's next also is to keep partnering with people and research partners in order to gather more evidence. The more efforts, the better, we would like to think. So I think it's time for you to give us feedback. I hope these have been insightful. And I would love to hear now from you, your insights or your questions. We will have around 10 to 15 minutes for this Q&A session. You are all muted, so please, if you want to ask a question, raise your hand and my colleagues here will unmute you, and then you will be able to talk and raise your question. Okay, so I think some of you use the chat for this question. I have a question from Richard Kisang. Would you consider introducing commercial forestry workstream smallholder to ease pressure on natural forest? I maybe ask Richard if you can actually explain a bit more your question so I can fully understand what you mean. My colleagues will unmute you.
My name is Richard. Hello.
Hi, Richard. Yes.
My name is Richard. I'm joining the call from Nairobi, the webinar from Nairobi. My question is around, you find that over the past probably about 20 or so years, the efforts to protect the natural forests in Kenya and around the sort of Great Lakes region has been centered on protection without really giving alternatives to a viable alternative to the wood that people are trying to access from these forests.
Yeah.
And that has meant that there's been no sustainable business or market oriented solutions to conservation. And it becomes, in my view, it becomes very expensive, and yet the demand for wood for either commercial users making of wood furniture or even for wood fuel is likely to increase. And I'm thinking that given on the basis of the work that you're doing, some of the tea industry companies that you're working with, they would need wood fuel or other for energy. And some of those communities as well would, there might be some businesses that actually survive on the forest. Is it then possible for you to, would you consider encouraging commercial forestry enterprises where these communities that live around the forest or even far away from the forest can be able to grow trees for commercial reasons, and they effectively, there'd be no need for them to go to the forests?
Yeah, if I may answer this, thanks for your comment. Very true. Yeah, we are aware of the tree plantations also need some wood production, and several of the companies that we work with, they do produce their own wood, so they don't extract the wood from the forest, and that's what it needs to happen. So wood plantations need to happen in order to stop deforestation. I agree. So on the private sector hand, we are working on with the private sector for this to happen, and many companies are already doing it. On the local community side, um, indeed, we have to offer alternative for the local community, both for their own use of energy, wood or charcoal, but also if they want to have economic activities. So we are working now on the grazing, because the local communities around the Mau forest, they use the forest for energy, true, but also even more for grazing, for bringing the animals there for grazing. So we have a program that's going to start or it's already starting, on giving them knowledge in order to increase grazing within the farm. That's why with new varieties of cows, but also with learning how to produce feedstock within the farm, and all this training and all these resources. So we hope that means that they don't need to go to the forest. For alternative energy within the household, we are also having projects working on finding the way to have alternative ways for them to use cooking energy within the household that's not the wood. And I welcome your idea on commercial forest by the farmers. Indeed, we will take this into account, and sure my colleagues working on this, they hopefully are aware of this, but I will welcome you to talk to Winnie, which is our local person in Kenya, and she will I'm sure she will love to follow up with you. So I think it's good to go now to the next question. Thanks again, Richard. We will go with Henk. Henk from UTS, I think. Hello, Henk.
Thank you. You unmuted myself and I did, so I muted myself again. Here I go. Thank you, Carla and IDH, for this presentation. And I want to congratulate you, first of all, with this landmark report, because having such a broad portfolio covering so many sectors and interventions and partners, I think it's a tremendous challenge to synthesize it. And I think you did a wonderful job with your partners in putting it together, distilling evidence, and also communicating it in an appealing way. I like the visuals.
Thanks.
I like very much the theories of change. It really resonates with the thinking and the strategies that we as UTS also have in the areas that we work with. I also appreciate that you acknowledge the evidence that your partners bring to the table, as well as the fact that it's not only IDH who is making all these miracles, but it's a lot of other actors that are hands-on doing this work. Yeah. I think it's a great piece, and I'm already looking forward to your next two reports. Now, having such a portfolio, how do you manage the possible, I would say, risk or the criticism that you might get for cherry picking the nice results? How have you managed that? And maybe there's a role for your scientific committee there, because I read in your report that you have a scientific committee. Maybe the name you give it is different, but you have some externals also advising you or monitoring you. Can you explain what their role in this process is?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Hank, for your comment. We do have an impact committee. We are very proud of it because it brings credibility, but it also helps us to make sure we don't do this cherry picking that you are saying, and that we are as scientifically sound as possible. This impact committee is formed by someone from the private sector. This is from Unilever, Jankies. We also have someone from the university, from Erasmus University in Rotterdam, which is our chair of the impact committee. So someone coming from the private sector, someone coming from research. We also have someone coming from an NGO, and someone coming from a research institution in the UK, IIED. So to be honest, it's always tough to go to the impact committee, because indeed they want us to be as scientifically sound as possible. So it is very interesting discussions. We always have to improve, and when we always leave these committees, okay, we have a lot to be done, a lot to improve, how to prove things at the field level, how to prove things at the governance level. But it is needed. We need to make sure that what we do is relevant for the scientific community and for other organizations. And we know that our challenges are not only our IDA challenges, as you know, and as you said, what we work on, many other organizations do the same work and face the same challenges on showing this impact at the field. Do we really increase yields? Do we really increase livelihoods? How do we prove that? So the Impact Committee help us on answering these questions and make sure we don't do the cherry picking. But also I'm happy to collaborate with UTS, ISIL, and all the other organizations that face the same challenges. And if we can pull resources together, and with this report, as I said, we gather your evidence also, and we need to do that. We cannot pretend that we IDH can do everything alone or can prove everything alone. Thanks again, Hank, for your comment. We will go to a comment from Sheila, and maybe it's better again if maybe you, we will unmute you, and if you can raise your question. It's nicer. You have written the question, but I would love if you can just tell us.
Well, I had to, first I apologise, I missed a bit at the beginning, and I was asking whether we would get a copy of your presentation, which was very interesting. Second, from Pan UK, and obviously my interest is in agrochemical use and safer alternatives. And I'd love to hear a bit more about your activities, how you monitor that, and what criteria you use.
Sorry, how we monitor on agrochemicals in particular, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Okay, good question, Sheila. So first, we will share this afterwards. We will share the presentation with my speaking there, and we will also share the reports again in case you didn't find them before.
Thank you.
So don't worry about that. And on the agrochemical work, indeed, this is challenging, as you know more than probably I do, to measure. Please, if. So we have some KPIs, some key performance indicators that are on the agrochemical work and within IDH, for instance, training of farmers. We also specify if the training has happened on agrochemicals or not. And currently, actually, we are designing with our impact lead, Flavio, that hopefully you know about him. He has our impact lead on agrochemical management. We have chosen 5 key KPIs, indicators that we think are key for agrochemicals, and we will make sure that they are in all our contracts that we commission from now on our agrochemical work. And in terms of in-depth research, we have our work in cotton in India. So Better Cotton Initiative is gathering a lot of evidence. And also there is also some researchers that I think are in this call that are also helping us build evidence on what we do on Better Cotton Initiative if we manage to reduce the input of agrochemicals due to this certification. And also in Vietnam, we have commissioned just a baseline on our work on having this landscape approach for agrochemicals. So we set a baseline on where are we today, on which are, for instance, we discovered that many agrochemical products available in Vietnam are illegal. So we are working with our public and private partners to reduce the availability of these illegal products within the market, and also to make sure that farmers know which are the right products to use for which pest or for which problem. So a lot going on. I would say, Sheila, if you want to know more, please do contact me or contact Flavio, the impact lead of this impact team.
Okay, thanks very much. I'd be interested in how you approach safer alternatives rather than simply swapping one chemical for another. But that's a big conversation probably for another time.
Yeah, would love to follow up maybe in another time. Let's follow up later. Thanks. Okay, we have a raised hand. for someone, we are going to mute. I think we have a little problem, and many people is called Elske, which is our communication manager. But maybe if you can introduce yourself and raise your question, we are going to mute you now.
Yes, hi, I'm Peter Lund Thompson with the Copenhagen Business School. I do sort of research on global value chains and corporate social responsibility in developing countries. Hi, Carla. I was wondering.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, I was wondering, it sounds a lot as if you're out to prove that your theory of change or the ways in which you work are generating positive consequences. But what about the long-term sort of unintended, perhaps negative consequences of the projects that IDH sponsors? Are you also trying to document that?
Yeah. Good question, and scary questions always coming from researchers. As I said, I was a researcher myself before, so I know you always go one step further. Thanks for that. The challenge for IDH, not being a research institution, is that we have to focus our research, and of course we would love to know an intended consequence, and if these unintended consequences are already captured within the research that we do, that's great. But sometimes, as you see, for instance, with the Kenya example, it's so broad what we do. We need to measure what's going on the farmer level, on the livelihoods level, on the land use level, so many things that happen. And on the way, indeed, we capture unintended consequences when possible. But we will be willing to partner with other. We are open here. So if we have research institutions like yourself that say, look, we love to have some student research on your pathways on what's actually the negative impacts of your projects, I am more than happy to welcome this research in IDH, and also if you have more colleagues that will be happy to do research on us, please do forward this presentation and this booklet, and let's follow up on a later stage. So I think it's only 3 minutes to 4. So I think let's have one last question, and then we will wrap up. And again, we will follow up with a survey. So and you can always contact me further for any other questions. So this question is coming from Stephanie, and we are muting you now, hopefully. Yes.
Hello, thanks very much for a very good and interesting presentation. It got me thinking. My question is really a suggestion, and it's in relation to the project on phasing out highly hazardous pesticides in Costa Rica, which PAN-UK has been involved with, and is having an extension phase. And it just seems to bring together a lot of the different boxes you had in your theory of change and your impact assessment slides, because the project's funded by SICOM, which is a global level multi-stakeholder forum, so you've got the global governance bit. It was conducted by partners at the National University there, and they did pesticide use surveys on pineapple farms, large and small growers. They also trialed some alternatives to specific hazardous pesticides in use in pineapple. PAN-UK provided a link with 2 British supermarkets here and 1 fruit import company. They're all keen to take that work further, as are some of the pineapple growers. And in the last year, the Costa Rican government has actually published a kind of like a white paper for a national chemicals management plan. So I think it'd be a really good opportunity for IDH workstream to get involved if that's possible. Yeah. And for you guys, if you could help us with some of the impact assessment side, the concepts I think would really add value to work that's already going on there.
Okay, yeah, thanks, Stephanie. That's very nice, very interesting. And I think we need to discuss this further. So probably maybe if you can contact me later, we will. My email is going to be there, and I will forward this also to my colleagues working on pineapples and on agrochemicals, Flavio. And yeah. It's just that we don't have time now, but please do follow up with me after this meeting. And I think now it's sharp 4, so I would like to stick to the time and close now. And we are just in the last slide with my email, just to say again, please do contact me to follow up on anything, and we will send this survey, give us your feedback. That would be great. And also the booklet will be there in case you want to for further reading. So I think that's it for today. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining and for interesting, although small discussion, but I hope to follow up with you separately. Thanks again. Goodbye.